Hi, everyone. Today I have the privilege and honor to be speaking with author Alyssa Maxwell. And I want to talk to her today about her new book called Murder, and I hope I say this right, Murder at Chateau sur Mer. And this is Mer. Okay. This is book number 5 in this series, the Gilded Newport series. And I am so happy to be talking to you about these books today.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle.
Oh, I loved this book, okay? And I only read number 5, and, so for everybody out there that reads series, I love book series, love them. I wish I could have had time to read them all because I definitely would have, but when I saw it was your newest, I like to pick them up, and then sometimes it's also good to be able to tell people that you don't have to read all the series. Of course, we want you to read the whole series, but if you just want to read about Chateau sur Mer, do that because it is definitely a standalone as long as a part of a series.
Right. I try very hard to make them that way so that somebody can just pick up whatever newest book they happen to find and read it and then maybe go back and fill in the blanks later with the earlier book.
Yeah, and really, before I started doing this, I was one of those readers that would have started with book 1 because that's just me. I have to do things in order,
Right.
But, the more authors I've interviewed, and I don't have time to do that, I have had a new perspective of doing it like this because it does make you appreciate them as a standalone and understand the work that you have to put into to make it that a reader can just pick up any one of your books at any time and not feel lost,
Yes.
So anyway, so this one, because this is the one I read, and first of all, I just saw again this term. I had interviewed an author a little while ago, and she was Canadian, and she called her books cozy mysteries. And I had asked her about that. I was like, I never heard of that as a genre. But then I saw, and I don't know if you gave it these terms, but somebody gave your books this term also. And what do you think that means for people who and I'm a reader and I really haven't, now I'm seeing it, but it was only the second time I've seen the word cozy mentioned with a book. Did you come up with that or did people kind of title them for you like that?
Yeah, no, I didn't come up with that at all. Cozy mysteries tend to be contemporary mysteries. Mine are historical. But what makes it a cozy is an amateur sleuth, so someone who hasn't been trained in police work or detective work, a closed environment, such as a small town or, in my case, an island, which creates a small group of characters who tend to know each other and depend on each other. The sleuth tends to depend on family or friends to help her through. Let's see. Often with the contemporary cozies, there's a craft involved. So you'll see quilting cozies or cooking or knitting is very popular. So cozy means it's a smaller scope of a mystery, a more personal and character-driven mystery. So you're not going to find international espionage, and your sleuth is probably not going to travel outside her immediate home environment. So I've really combined a historical mystery with cozy mystery.
Interesting. And you know what? That isn't what I thought. So I'm really glad that you helped me with the definition.
Okay. I'm glad to have been of service.
Because here's what I was thinking. Because of identifying it with these other books that I had read is that I looked at it like it's also they're books that you don't have to be worried. Like when I was reading your book, it isn't gruesome. Even though it's a murder mystery, it's not about the detail of whatever the murder is. It's not about shocking you with details that you don't want to read. For somebody like me where I'm I don't need to know exactly, all that gruesome stuff. That it's kind of
also...
Is that part of the definition?
Yes, that's a very good point you're making. The murders are not described in graphic detail. You don't have to get into the specifics of forensics so deeply. And the language is...
yes.
Right. There's no foul language and there's no real intimacy. It's a kiss and fade if you have any kind of romantic thread going through your mystery, which a lot of cozy mysteries do. So that's also a feature of that kind of mystery.
Right, where you're not afraid if your teenage daughter picks it up, you're like, you're going to screen it, like
not at all.
No.
That's right. I do go into some adult themes, but a lot of it is implied or touched upon without going into the details. So yes, and that's something I go ahead.
No, go ahead. I want to hear that.
I was going to say that's something that I really enjoy, knowing that people of almost any age can read my books.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, in a world of, like, you don't know, and then all of a sudden you're reading a book and you're like, oh, I did not want all that in this book. Like,
and that happens,
Yeah, and that happens. And it's nice to know that there is that term. So you're like, okay, so I can, I don't have to worry about reading any details that I don't want to. And I'm 52, but I totally appreciate that. Just so you know, like, I actually try to steer away from books, in the past that I've picked up and, I've interviewed the author and I was like, oh, this is just not something I would have wanted to read, but I didn't know it, because I didn't understand where it was going to go. But anyway, so going back to this book, I'm glad we cleared that up because it is really important. It's a really important thing for people to know out there. And, because I think there are more of us than there are not. So I'm going to go with that when we're reading books. But anyway, so we have society reporter Emma Cross, and she is in all your books. She is the theme. She's the person that crosses over into every one of this series of Gilded, Newport, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
So, and I did see, because I kind of went back on Amazon and I kind of read about all of them in this series just to have like an idea, because I love this concept. First of all, I'm a historical fiction reader and a history reader. And I love the fact that you took this part of Rhode Island, which I've been to, and I didn't ever go in any of these mansions, but I definitely saw them from, like there's this one road that you can go down and look at all the mansions, and it's absolutely beautiful. But you took
Bellevue Avenue.
Yes. What is it called?
Bellevue Avenue.
Bellevue Avenue. There you go. And just to take that drive is just amazing, and, but then, I found out during research that you can actually go and see these mansions, a lot of them. And, so I love the concept that you took them, from their heyday, basically, and, are writing stories about them and the people and these historical people, and then putting, fiction people in it. And, so we have in this one, it is about the story of the Wetmores. So I guess the Chateau sur Mer was their estate. That's what they called it, or Mer. I'm going to hopefully.
Yes, Chateau sur Mer was built by the Wetmore family, by the generation before the Wetmores who are featured in the story. But what made them unique among the Newport socialites was that they were year-round residents of the town. They didn't live in New York and only come for 8 weeks out of the summer like most of the rest of them did.
Interesting.
They were Newporters. They were Rhode Islanders. He was a governor of Rhode Island and a U.S. senator representing Rhode Island. And that made them special in my view and in my sleuth's view.
Right. And that's what I love learning about, I guess when you pick that time period, the late 1800s, early 1900s, was that basically when these places were at their, I don't know, like that they were.
Yeah, that was the heyday of the Gilded Age. Exactly.
Okay.
That's when these people were at the height of their wealth and their fame, and their industries were booming at that time.
Yeah, and those names meant something. The Vanderbilts and Astors, and like people knew who they were, even with the limited amount of press and TV that we have now. Like
well, there was more press about those people than we might think initially. And they were the aristocracy and the celebrities of their time.
Interesting. So this story goes into that a prostitute is And of course, they don't call her really a prostitute back then, which I thought that was, interesting how, it kind of they talk around what she does.
Right. In polite society. We don't say certain words.
Right, exactly. And then she ends up dead, and it's about Emma Cross, solving the murder. And what I love about murder mysteries, and I don't read a lot of them, but what I loved about this one was that I really had no idea where you were going with it. Like, even halfway through, I was still really like, sometimes I'll read it and I'll be like, okay, I know, and I'm not shocked, but I love this story. I love the way that it was, it brought in all of these people, and of course everybody was concerned because of who she was. It kind of brought everybody's attention. Like, do you know her? Do you know what she does? I love that part of the story. So, and then to go back and see your other stories, I thought maybe we could talk about those also, because of how not only that Emma is a part of every one of those stories, but about the different families and the names of their mansions. Because first of all, why did they name mansions like that? Was there a reason that they did that?
Well, some of them are named for their environment. I mean, Chateau sur Mer means mansion on the sea. And the breakers meant, the waves, waves breaking against the cliff, so the breakers.
Right, that's the one I knew of.
I think it's Rough Point.
Right.
Was named because it's actually on a point. The seas are very rough there, and it's very rocky and hilly. So the names really do kind of evoke an atmosphere for each different house.
Interesting. So the Vanderbilts, their summer home was the Breakers, right?
Right, the Cornelius Vanderbilts. There were also the Frederick Vanderbilts, who owned Rough Point, and the William Vanderbilts. William and Alva owned Marble House. So there were quite a lot of Vanderbilts around in the summer.
Right. You know what? And that's awesome. I'm glad you mentioned that, because when I was looking, I was like, wait, did the Vanderbilts have three different, were they sons and daughters, or were they, how were they?
They were siblings.
Related? They were siblings.
Yes.
Okay.
Cornelius, William, and Frederick were siblings. And then, of course, there's the Biltmore in North Carolina. That was another one of the Vanderbilts. I believe he was a cousin, although I could be wrong. He may have been a sibling.
And then Astor had the Beechwood, right?
That's right, yes.
Okay. So, and you lived up in New England. Did you live in Rhode Island? Did you grow up in Rhode Island?
I grew up in Connecticut. My husband is from Newport, and his family goes back for generations. And his grandfather was a bit of a historian. I would say amateur historian, but some of his work is so extensive and so detailed that he goes beyond amateur. His father also was an extensive photographer and has photo records of Newport from the 40s that in some ways shows what it would have looked like a bit even in Emma's time, because things hadn't changed that much during those decades. So I just have a wealth of information, and if I need to know something, I can go to my husband and ask him questions, and he can look things up in his records that he's brought home from Newport. So my interest is more than just academic. It's more than just as a writer. It's our home away from home, and we truly, truly love it. In fact, we're going this weekend.
Yay!
Combination research and family trip.
I live in Pennsylvania. Okay, most of my life I've traveled around a little bit, but for most of my life I've lived in Pennsylvania, and I had to go to Rhode Island for something for my daughter, and I expected it to be like Jersey, New York. I did not expect what I saw in Rhode Island. Okay, so I get it. I really do. It was mind blowing. And the one time we went there twice, and the one time was in December, and we were there for a very bad storm, winter storm, and I never felt wind like I felt in Rhode Island. Like, oh my gosh, we could hardly walk.
Yeah.
But I mean, when it was clear out the next day, and we went for that drive, and I was like, wow, nobody talks about this. Nobody talks about how beautiful Rhode Island is, especially in my part of the world. In Pennsylvania, nobody says, oh, you should go to Rhode Island. It's beautiful there because, it's just not a part of us. But, I mean, I was just blown away. I really was. So I was really happy to read these and learn a bit of the history of it because I didn't even know that. I knew I saw the mansions, but I didn't realize, like, the history behind them. And now that they're museums and on your website you talk about, going to visit the different museums, when did they become museums? When were they just not just houses for these families?
Some of them were owned up until, I'd say, about the 50s. The Preservation Society started rescuing these houses from the wrecking ball about the late 50s, early 60s. Chateau sur Mer was lived in by, I believe it was Edith Wetmore, until the 50s. And let's see, Ochre Court, which I just finished writing Murder at Ochre Court, was also owned into the 50s by the original family and was given to Salve Regina College and became their administrative building. But so many of the mansions that originally were there were torn down. In fact, my husband's family had a bit of a connection to that. They were in the moving but also wrecking business where they were hired to go and take down some of the mansions. But what they did was they reclaimed some of the woodwork and things and built smaller houses using some of the materials that they saved from the mansion. So that's why cool.
Why did they get passed? Like, why didn't it continue to get passed down to the families, then just become disinterested? That they were, wanting to just give them up?
The houses became white elephants, but also a lot of that wealth just didn't exist anymore. Once we got into the 19 teens and income tax were, instated in this country, money was lost that way. Before that, any money they made was theirs free and clear. So there was income tax. There was the Great Depression, of course, really put an end to the Gilded Age. The Roaring Twenties came to a roaring end in 1929. And some of the industries, like for instance, the Vanderbilts were in railroads. Well, once cars became widespread and roads became more and more passable, people stopped taking railroads in the numbers that they had been. So again, that money began to dwindle. And they just couldn't afford to keep these massive, these huge houses running anymore. Some of them needed staffs of, 20 to 50 servants just to keep them clean, keep them running, keep the electricity going. So it wasn't sustainable anymore.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. I'm really, I love history, so this is all just very interesting to me. But okay, so for everybody out there, for your readers, and you also have another series you're going. I mean, you, even with this Gilded Newport, you're writing a book a year, basically. And that is just amazing.
One of those each year.
Right. And so you said you already have another one coming out. So number 6, right?
Right, that will be in the summer, but I'm also writing a Lady and Ladies Maid mysteries.
Right, I saw that.
I'm actually writing 2 books a year.
Okay.
And they alternate.
Oh, my
with release dates.
Okay, and that's what I was going to say, because I was like, then I went back and looked at that, the lady, and those are set in England, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Just post-World War I.
Well, which is just, first of all, I love that time period, and I will be reading these. I can't wait. Okay, because I love that. I the little bit that I read about it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so right up my alley of things I love to read. And
great.
but I also saw that it's like it kind of goes back and forth, and I'm thinking, okay, you're writing a lot. You're writing a lot of books, and you've got 2 separate series. How do you just focus on one? Like, do you focus on the one series, or are you kind of writing them simultaneously, going back and forth, or like how do you work that in your schedule?
I focus on one book at a time. I have 6 months to write each book, so. Yeah, I have to compartmentalize. I can't go back and forth. I'm not that kind of writer. I can't write one thing in the morning and something else in the afternoon.
Right.
But it works for me to just focus. I mean, mentioned I'm going up to Newport. So I'll be doing some research up there and taking notes and taking pictures. But I'm not going to come home and start writing the next book. When I come home, I have to continue writing my next Lady and Ladies Maid book and make sure I have that ready for my deadline, and at which time I'll switch over and begin the next Newport book.
Well, it definitely keeps things interesting, though, for you.
Yeah,
for sure.
It does, and for some reason I can keep them straight. I'm not even sure how I do it, but I don't get confused between characters and settings and historical details.
Right.
So it does work.
Yeah, well, and they are vastly different. I mean, even though the time frame isn't too much off, but they're still vastly different stories. So I can see how you could keep characters a little bit, separated. But so in the Lady and the Ladies Maid mystery, you have one coming out this December called A Devious Death.
That's right.
Okay. Did you want to tell us anything about that for all of your readers who are waiting for it?
Well, we have, it's the third book in the series, and Phoebe will find herself with her maid, Eva, and her sister, Julia, at a very strange house party. It's a small house party, and things are not what they would expect at an English country estate. And this book deals with not so much World War I, but what was going on in Russia at the time and how some of those views in Russia were spreading into Western Europe and people's reactions to that.
Interesting.
So it's a bit different, right? The themes are a bit different from the other two books in the series. I get confused because I'm on book 4. So that's something I do get confused on. Which book are we talking about here? Is it 2? Is it 3? Is it 4?
Right. Well, the good thing about that, too, also with that coming out in December, is that we're coming up on the 100-year, for the Romanovs in Russia and all that World War I stuff.
Right.
I've seen a huge research. It seemed like people were going through the World War II books of historical fiction, and now I'm seeing a huge amount of World War I stuff coming up because of the anniversary of the ending of World War I, and so I think the timing on that is perfect. But like I said, I can't wait to dive into those too. So, but I did see something on your website. You are living in South Florida, and you had some pictures taken in Jupiter. And my mom, she passed away a little while ago, but she lived in Jupiter for 25 years. So I'm really familiar with Jupiter. Are you living in Jupiter right now, or?
No, we're down further, just outside of Fort Lauderdale. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Because when I saw those pictures, I was like, oh, I know exactly where those are. I know exactly where that is.
We love the lighthouse.
Yes.
I love climbing lighthouses.
Oh, really? Yeah, and my brother still lives in Jupiter, so I go to see him fairly often, and they both live right on the beach in Jupiter, which is just
No.
Lucky. But you have the best of both worlds, because going to New England and then living in Florida, I think that is truly a blessing.
Yes, I'm a warm weather person, so Newport in the winter is not going to happen.
Right.
Not on any full-time basis.
Right, exactly. So, well, thank you so much, Alyssa. I will have all of your links under this so people can find you. And I'm so excited that I found you, because I love your books. They're amazing.
Oh, thank you so much.
I love your writing, and it was a lot of fun, and I love books that are fun,
Great.
So, anyway.
Well, we try to keep it fun.
That's right. All right. Well, you have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks. You too. This was my pleasure.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.